Hello and welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options, and not having a clear plan is the enemy. And using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is an amazing way for you to exit highly appreciated assets, defer millions to hundreds of thousands of dollars of capital gains tax, or in the reverse order, so you can create and preserve more wealth or help your clients, friends, and family do the same. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swarts. In each episode, I'm joined by some of the best financial, wealth, business, crypto, real estate minds in the world. I'm typically joined by them, but today I am just going to be talking today about about exiting and building wealth out of a crisis. And so I want to thank you for joining, and I want to encourage you to rate, review, subscribe on our YouTube channel, on iTunes, or anywhere else that you might, Spotify, that you might be consuming the content. And let's face it, if your exit plan today looks similar to your pre-pandemic plan, you probably have a bad plan. And so today we're talking about exiting and building wealth out of a crisis. We're talking about this, the 5 key differences you need to take to exit yourself out of your asset or your property, your cryptocurrency, your business, in a way that helps you to achieve your goals and create and preserve more wealth. You know, I remember in 2008 when the crash kind of happened, and we were helping clients and friends and family create and preserve wealth with real estate, and they didn't have a great plan prior to that, or a lot of them did not have a great plan in preparation for that crisis. And so looking back, we learned some lessons. That's part of why we love the Deferred Sales Trust, but there's some other lessons as well, and that we can learn and kind of glean from, and also think about with moving forward right now. Because as the world begins to reopen, you know, many clients, many investors and business owners assume perhaps the good times may go back to business as usual. But there's nothing usual about the future we're walking into. In fact, if you're exiting or building wealth out of chaos or out of a crisis and into one of the most unpredictable seasons we're experiencing in our lifetimes, the world is changing all around us. And therefore your strategy, your exit strategy, and your plan for building your wealth needs to change. And we believe that you need a very intentional strategy. And so we're going to provide 5 keys to exit well out of a changing world that some would call a crisis. And so let's dive right into it. Number 1, question everything. Be willing to change anything. Okay, we want you to encourage you, and we're telling ourselves as well, and our team and our clients, friends, and family, to question everything and be willing to change anything. And so if you build an exit now, like you built and exited before the crisis, you're not going to exit or build very well. And that's kind of the premise of everything is changing, and therefore you have to really be willing to question everything and be willing to change anything. And I recently read a book, and I'm still rereading it and listening to an audiobook, and I bought the teenage version and then the full book, and it's called Principles, and it's by Ray Dalio. And he talks about trading the joy of being right for the joy of what's true. And what's changing right now so drastically in the marketplace is we have to take off maybe the old ways of thinking, right? And trade the joy of being right in our old ways and for the joy of actually what's true. And that means being open to ideas and open to things that are different and new. And so part of that is questioning everything you do. And then here's the key though. You want to let the numbers speak the truth to your exit plan, the numbers. To give you a couple examples of that, we have some clients that we help to sell some multifamily properties here in Sacramento. And during our analysis of should they sell, should they hold, what should they do, we really want to look at the numbers. And part of the numbers for a deal I have right now is a $2.7 million property in the Placerville area. And for those clients, they had next to zero basis and next to zero debt. And their NOI, the net operating income, was about $120,000. And so their cash on cash return we were looking at in comparison to the 2.7 million wasn't as efficient as it could be. In fact, using the Deferred Sales Trust or just moving into different properties, they were going to be able to increase their NOI pretty conservatively from about $120,000 to about $190,000 per year. It's about a $70,000 increase cash on cash return year over year. And also be able to lower their risk, get out of rent control California, maybe potentially eviction control with COVID-19, all of these different challenges, and be able to retire a little bit more and be able to have some liquidity, some diversification to go back into some deals. And so looking at those numbers really helped to solidify their exit plan, whether or not the deferred sales trust made sense with the fees, whether or not just keeping what they had made sense, and all of those things combined, those numbers brought clarity to the ideas of holding versus selling. And so, again, the key here is to question everything, let the numbers speak the truth to your exit plan. So that means the return on investment on some of your key strategies might be going down, such as the 1031 exchange. And this should cause you to change how you're approaching those strategies. It could be your depreciation schedule is too low. It could be that you have an estate planning, estate tax challenge moving forward. It's a legacy play that the 1031 exchange doesn't solve for, which is just a stepped up basis. And so the key is to make sure you're looking at those numbers. I'll give you kind of the other side of the things too, or the other side of the thing, back to 2008, other side of the coin. It wasn't just a return scenario. It was more like a risk mitigation scenario. And I worked with an owner, and this is prior to 2008 crash. He had a $50 million asset, or multiple assets, apartment complexes. He was pretty highly leveraged though, 75 to 80%. He'd done some 1031 exchanges. These were some value add properties. And basically he got caught where he was 1031 exchanging, and then the music kind of stopped, and all of a sudden he was piled on with some debt. He started to see, tenants not able to pay the rent, and banks starting to put pressure on him, and he ended up losing all of his assets and going bankrupt. And so this debt essentially collapsed on him, and he lost all of his wealth. And that's part of why it's important now more than ever to question everything and be willing to change anything and not just be stuck in the ways of the old ways of doing things, okay? So as you exit the world of chaos and crisis, you want to know your numbers better than ever and let them guide you. And what does that actually mean practically? Well, you want to know your capital gains tax liability. You want to know that to a T. You want to know your estate planning tax liability, right? The 40% above 22 million or 12 million single exemptions. If your net worth is greater than that, you want to know that. And what is your plan to exit, to try to help exit some of that wealth outside of your estate? Is that meaning you're getting life insurance? Does that mean you're going to have to give it away to charities? Is that meaning you're going to have to gift it away? Or it can use the Deferred Sales Trust Plus to move it outside the taxable estate upon an exit of an asset. At one time, we can do that. We can help you with that. You also want to know your debt, right? You want to not just know your debt in the sense of, oh, I have X amount that I owe, but more so, is it adjustable? Is it in a fixed rate period? When is the balloon payment coming due? Is there a prepayment penalty? Is there yield maintenance? These are all the things that are essential to your wealth, right? And their properties or your assets or whatever you're counting on to keep everything going, whether that be business debt, whether that be credit lines, right? Know your debt, know the adjustable debt, because there's obviously interest rates are going higher, and we're seeing that. We're seeing with inflation, and banks are getting a little more cautious. And so you want to definitely know your numbers by knowing your debt. You also want to know your debt over basis. This is a common thing we face with the Deferred Sales Trust clients, and that before people sell, they want to know if the Deferred Sales Trust will defer all of the capital gains tax, including depreciation and depreciation recapture. And the answer is yes, it does. However, it doesn't for debt over basis. And so one of the cool things about refinancing assets is that it's tax-free on the refinance. But what you don't realize, or maybe you forgot, or even we forget until we really focus on our numbers, is our basis versus our debt. And if our debt is above our basis, the government's going to count that as ordinary income tax, and it's not deferrable. Okay, so we want to be aware of that. Now we have a solution for that. You can watch a whole nother video on how to solve debt over basis. And we just did a $4.2 million exit for a client in Colorado who did a partial Delaware statutory trust and a partial deferred sales trust to solve that. But again, know those numbers, because it's very important that you don't get caught with a big tax bill. Also, know what the 1031 exchange works for and doesn't work for. So not just knowing your numbers, but knowing your strategies and what they actually apply to. For example, the 1031 doesn't work for primary homes, doesn't work for businesses, doesn't work for NFTs or cryptocurrency or artwork or collectible. It only works for investment real estate. And it has to be like kind, and it has to be identified within 45 days of you closing, and you have to close on that within 180 days of your closing. So just know what that works for. Also know what the Deferred Sales Trust works for, right? Which works for all asset types. Crypto, business sales, primary homes, investment real estate can save a failed 1031 exchange. Know the people you're working with, that the accommodator will accept and work with the Deferred Sales Trust, that they're not going to block that. In fact, we've had multiple calls with millions of dollars of tax liability in the past few months where there's accommodators that people didn't know going in that accommodator would not accommodate for the Deferred Sales Trust for a number of their own reasons. But there are those that do, and those are the ones that are strategically aligned with us. We're happy to connect you with them. So know what your actual accommodator will accommodate. And that's your 1031 exchange qualified intermediary. Also know about opportunity zones, right? So the Deferred Sales Trust is just one way to solve for capital gains tax, but there's also opportunity zones, which can be amazing. Now the key is the opportunity makes sense itself, and the opportunity zone itself is kind of the overlay is gravy upon it. So the property and the real estate, the intrinsic value of that makes sense. And then the opportunity zone benefit is just gravy on that. Same thing with the Deferred Sales Trust, by the way. The tax deferral and the liquidity, the diversification, the numbers got to make sense on the actual intrinsic tax that you would have paid versus the cash flow you can earn off of it and the estate tax that you can eliminate. So these things are all you want to take in mind. Also know the key CARES Act opportunities for tax credits for employee health and employee retention. So the CARES Act, a part of the response from the government to help out those that were, especially business owners that were hurt during COVID and everything else. There's some really cool tax credits that are available that we're helping our clients with as well. And we have connections to connect you with that. All right, so that's just number one. All right, we have three more. I promise these. Actually, four more. No, I'm sorry. There's 2 more. We'll just keep going to the next one here. Number 2, listen more, talk less. All right, listen more, talk less. Now, you might be tempted to talk more than normal in this season, but we want to encourage you to resist that temptation, to lead yourself out of a new season of wealth building. You want to build a dream team around you to where you want to go. And from there, you need to listen more and talk less. Okay, so bring in the dream team, financial advisor, CPA, Deferred Sales Trust advisor, commercial real estate broker, crypto advisor. It's important that your team hears from you as well, not just bring them in, but they hear from you. And it's more important that you hear from your dream team right now. And so what is your financial advisor saying? What is your CPA saying? What is your lender or commercial real estate and realtor saying? What is your cryptocurrency advisor saying? Spend time debating and digging into what's happening in the market right now. And because everything is changing very rapidly in the marketplace, and so it's now more important that you increase your communication and how you position your wealth, and debating and digging into how you position your wealth to a. Sorry about that. We got a little intercept here. How are you positioning your wealth in a way that's going to fit your goals and your dreams, right? So your dream team's mindset right now in this world of wealth and everything that's changing is probably very different than you think it is, because it has changed a lot. So you want to make sure you guys are digging in together to clarify what's going on. And that means you probably have pockets of your investments that are healthy and doing great, which is good. You want to know that. And pockets of your investments that may be bleeding out, or pockets where you are efficient or not as efficient as they could be, and or money sitting in the bank, by the way, going backwards with inflation. Be careful with that as well. How can you earn simple interest while maintaining liquidity and little to no risk? There are things out there for that, but just be aware and be very open to what's available. Because of this, by the way, there's no one-size-fits-all approach that will work in this season. So what can you do? You can go to all of your investments and your advisors who are directly reported to you and help you navigate these things in the next 72 hours. And you can ask them these 3 questions. Number 1, how are you doing, right? And how are my investments doing, right? How are you doing and how are my investments doing? Just a basic baseline of what is happening right now. What are you seeing in the marketplace? And how are my investments doing? Question number 2, how can I make it easier for you to execute my business plan? How can I make it easier for you to execute my business plan? That's assuming a couple of things. 1, they actually know your business plan, right? And 2, you have a business plan, right? And then 3, you're actually reviewing it and going through it. Because it's one thing to set the goal or have the business plan, but it's another thing to, if we're not going through it and encouraging and walking through, if we're executing on that. Which leads into number 3 question you should ask them. What should we change about our strategy? What should we change about our strategy? So after having meetings like this with your top advisors, I think you're going to realize this. It's really crazy out there, right? And one strategy isn't going to work everywhere for everyone anymore. And when you dig in with your advisor team, don't just ask what's happening in the specific market. Ask about what's happening outside of the market, such as tax policy, interest rates, supply chain, right? Real estate values, what's happening, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, the marketplace, what's happening in your what's happening in your advisor's market that they're focused on that affects what strategy they should be doing for your investments and your overall investments. Are your advisors talking to one another? And how do those correlate, right? Are there certain assets that you could sell, defer the tax, invest into more real estate and get some depreciation on, right? Real estate gives you depreciation, and there's a thing called accelerated depreciation, in which you can take advantage of and get 100% bonus depreciation if you're a real estate professional this year. But all your money's tied up in the stock market, which doesn't have any depreciation opportunity. So how do you connect those dots, right? How do you connect the dots of your CPA saying that, hey, your income is X this year, and unless you have some write-off somewhere else, you're going to be taxed in the highest bracket? Like, there are ways to do things, and there are, that your advisors, if they just talked with one another, if you formed a little meeting for an hour where all of them show up at once on a Zoom, and you guys go through this strategy and how one affects the other, that could change your wealth plan. And I think that's really important as well. All right, which leads into number 3 question, or three point here. We're talking about the 5 keys to exit well out of a changing world that some would call a crisis, and exiting and building wealth out of a crisis. And so number 3, we encourage you to build like you're starting from zero. Build like you're starting from zero. So I know in the first point I said question everything, be willing to change everything, but also there is a very important concept here, which is going back to the basics. As investment markets come back and then move again, we encourage you to go back to the basics and drive. And here's the basics, though. Basics are the fundamentals, but here's the key here: that drive the goals, value, mission, and strategy over and over with your advisors. So go back to the basics and drive those goals, values, mission, and strategy over and over and over with your advisors. You should be your own chief cheerleader for your goals and values and mission. And your advisor should wrestle with you to fine-tune the strategy to get there. Okay? Don't assume that anyone remembers your goals, values, mission. Right? Focus on realigning your dreams and your dream team around them. Okay? Once you do this, your advisory team is realigned, you start winning together, and or have a clearer picture of what winning actually is. And so fundamentals is so important, so important. In fact, one of our heroes here at Capital Gains Tax Solutions, and a mentor that I look up to, he's a virtual mentor or a long-term mentor of books that I've read since I played basketball in college, is John Wooden. So I never actually met John Wooden in person, but I love everything about John Wooden. And one of the things he said which is so I think appropriate for today and even any day for fundamentals. And this is the quote. He says, "My bench players," talking about basketball, "never heard me mention winning. My whole emphasis was for each one of my players to try to learn to execute the fundamentals to the best of their ability. Not to be better than somebody else, but to learn from others. And never cease trying to be the best they could be. That's what I emphasized more than anything else." And so see what he says here. He says, the goal was not to mention winning. The goal was to focus on the execution of the fundamentals. The execution of the fundamentals. And then obviously being the best that they could be personally. So what are the things they can control? What are the things they can do? Not focusing on the outcome per se, but focusing on the fundamentals that they can do today and executing those. And so I think that's so important here, that we don't assume that anyone remembers our goals, mission, vision, or values, and we focus on encouraging and helping everyone remember those, and then the strategy, the fundamentals to execute that, okay? So once you start winning, and winning is, again, by focusing on those fundamentals, going back to the basics, like building from ground zero, right, of how you've built wealth, you start feeling more at ease and at peace with your investments, I believe. And you have to make investing and building your wealth business kind of like fun. You got to make it like part of it is got to make it like a game and make it like an encouraging, fun situation. But it's especially true right now that your dream team remembers that it's not just to be profitable, but you're here to make a difference in your family and their family's life. So think about the bigger values picture here, and not just the numbers. Number 4, let's go to number 4. Communicate twice as much as it feels natural to you, then double it. So we want to encourage you to communicate twice as much as it feels natural to you, and then double it. I remember when I first got on a video on a YouTube or even on a podcast, I mean, I felt like I was, pulling teeth, it was not easy, right? I didn't have the right lighting, I didn't have the right microphones, I didn't have a great setup, I didn't have a great brand, I didn't really have anything that, it didn't feel really natural to me, right? It felt awkward. I think they say one of the number 1 fears besides death, or maybe greater than death, is public speaking. And I don't know how that works for YouTube, because it's out to everyone anywhere. But the point of all this is it doesn't come natural necessarily to communicate over and over and over again. But right now, with all of the noise that's coming in to the marketplace constantly, to your advisors, to your team, to your family, you want to encourage you to communicate twice as much as it feels natural to you, but then not even just that, then double that. So go above and beyond. Okay, so when you don't communicate, your team starts making assumptions. And that's just true for all of us, right? They start making assumptions. So with how uncertain the world is, those assumptions are often bad assumptions, based upon bad information. Or again, they're forgetting your goals, your values, your vision, and your mission. So the more assumptions your team makes, the worse they feel, and also probably the worse outcome it is for you, for what you're trying to align, okay? So communicate frequently, communicate intimately, and proactively. Let's talk about that. By communicating frequently, you're going to make you're not going to make a communication mistake. Let me back up. If you're going to make a communication mistake, make the mistake of over-communicating rather than under-communicating. Your dream team or your advisory team needs to hear from you. Tell them where you're winning and where you're losing. So clarify the numbers, clarify where you believe you're winning and you're losing, and ask them where they believe that you're winning and losing. And then the hard truth told well is better than people wondering and not knowing. So err on the side of being more direct, more upfront, and not making assumptions, and know that the hard truth told well is better than people wondering and not knowing. So communicate intimately, right? Share with them your feelings and your challenges, right? And why this means so much to you for your wealth. And by that, be open, honest, and transparent with where you're at. Also, communicate proactively. Tell them where you're going. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Then go ahead and tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So it's just a basic form of communication that you want to practice. Okay. And when you do this, you're driving communication deep, very deep. Okay. Your leadership always matters, but it matters more than you can imagine right now. And by helping to build yourself and build around a dream team and being the leader to help drive what you're trying to achieve with your wealth, you want to make sure that you're over communicating. All right. And by the way, I want to give a lot of credit to a gentleman where I had inspiration from his podcast. He's a gentleman named Craig Groeschel, and he has a leadership podcast. And so we took a lot of his content and we repurposed it for investing. And so that's Craig Groeschel. I listen to him every week. He has a leadership podcast. You want to check it out. You want to subscribe. It's amazing. I think it's one of the top podcasts in the country right now. And he has a couple quotes to end with here. And Craig Groeschel says, "We're not rebuilding, we're building. We're not rebuilding, we're building." And that's really important right now in today's world. And you don't manage your way out of a crisis, you lead your way out of a crisis. You don't manage your way out of a crisis, you lead your way out of a crisis. And so I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm going to tell you what I told you, right? I told you, we talked about exiting and building wealth out of a crisis. If your exit plan looks similar today to the pre-pandemic plan, you probably have a bad plan. And right now you want to make sure that you're implementing these strategies. I think I said 5, but actually there's only 4, right? There's only 4 keys to exit well of a changing world. Or these are 4 keys. There's more than 4, but these are 4. Remember, you want to question everything. Be willing to change anything. You want to listen more. You want to talk less. You want to build like you're starting from ground zero. Go back to the fundamentals. Go back to the basics. Drive your goals, values, mission, and strategy over and over and over again with your advisors. And then you want to communicate twice as much as it feels natural to you. And then you want to double it. Okay, if we can help you at all in your wealth plan, your commercial real estate investing, your deferred sales trust exit plan, deferring in capital gains tax, we want to encourage you to go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com right now and book a time where we can speak with myself or one of my team members. Check out our new book that's coming out, by the way. It's pretty cool. It's called Building a Tax Deferred Exit Strategy. And it's a proven playbook for unlocking your ideal wealth plan when selling assets of any kind for yourself or your clients. We have some really amazing people like Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank in the book, and a number of commercial real estate syndicators, financial advisors, really smart people that we want to put this book in your hands. In the next 30 days, it's going to be released or so. So take a look at that. Thanks so much for watching or viewing this or listening to it. Please rate, review, subscribe, and we will talk to everybody